Well, here we go.
Yeah.
Welcome to Around Town.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. My name is Carla Berlin, and for those of you who maybe you may recognize his voice from the radio and other podcasts, I am lucky enough to have. Do you go by Jeffrey or Jeff?
I go by both. You can call me Jeff.
Yep,
That's
Jeff.
right.
I know he is Jeff, but officially legal name Jeffrey O'Brien, but he's known more as the lawyer extraordinaire.
These days, yeah.
Yes, and ironically, you're probably wondering, a lawyer, and he'll get into this, but he's here today to talk to us about marketing and personal branding for professionals, which a lot of us in business need and can use. And once you get to know Jeff in the next however long this will be, this conversation, you're going to understand why he is the one talking about it, even though this is also my background. But with that said, if you do have questions or you're not comfortable in the comments asking questions, feel free to private message either Jeff or myself. And I will, his name and everything is on here, but I will, after the show, tag him as well so you can get to him directly, and we'll give you his information.
That's great.
So take it away.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about marketing and personal branding for professionals. And Carla, I mean, you don't need to know anything about marketing. You're the expert, probably more than I do.
No.
But what this presentation is and how it came about is about a year ago, a friend of mine called me up, and he had a marketing group that he was chairing, and he was doing monthly presentations or hosting monthly speakers. And he called me up and he said, I'm looking for someone that could do a presentation on marketing and branding for professionals. And I thought about it a second, and I said, well, why not me? Because we lawyers are humble like that.
Right.
And it was like this uncomfortable pause on the phone, and he stopped and he said, as long as it's not an hour-long sales pitch as to why they should hire you as a lawyer, I'm cool with this. So I'm like, well, already my brand is strong that he knows that I would, be selling. But I said, no, I can do that. I can actually make a presentation. This will be fun. I had never talked about what went into my marketing strategy, or as I talk about what went in from going from that to this. And
right.
So I thought this will be fun. As I started to think about it, as I started to write some notes, I ended up creating kind of 10 founding principles or core principles for what forms my marketing strategy. And it's actually been really helpful talking about it and writing it down, because as I go forward in growing my legal practice and doing more marketing, it helps me kind of think along this strategy now as to what's the next step and the next step after that. So it started out, it was just kind of more of a fun thing.
Yep.
But I do have a passion for marketing and branding and becoming a personal brand or having my personal brand. And so this is fun to give to audiences. I do presentations where I talk about legal stuff. It's fun to do that too.
Right.
But this is something I think that it's kind of a way of giving back to people. That, like, no matter what, you don't have to hire me to hear this. There's something I say. This is what I use. You may find all of this useful. You may find some of it useful. You may find none of it useful. I doubt that, but
I doubt that.
But
yeah.
This is just what I use, and maybe the folks that are watching this that can take something from this and help with their marketing and their branding strategies.
Well, when I first met Jeff, we were both, well, you're a regular guest. I was just a one-time guest on the BS show with Bob Sansevier
Yep.
and his podcast. And my first impression of you, I was sitting there and I thought, oh my gosh. First you hear attorney and you're like, okay, I better, and he shows up very professional, like his brand. And then you started talking and you had all this knowledge. I'm like, this guy, I always say there's two things I'm an expert at, pageantry and marketing, but you know a lot of things. And you could be on one of those game shows with, quizzes and things. And I was thinking to myself, wow, but you're fun and you're funny and you have a good personality. So that for me, you doing this is a total no-brainer.
And it's funny you mention that, Carla, because that's part of the brand. From the very beginning, I've always wanted to create a brand that I think stands the stereotypes and the myths about lawyers on its head, so that I am approachable, I am relatable, I'm not, and that helps, I think, me generate a network of followers, of friends, of referral sources, and ultimately of clients, because they know that they can approach me, and I think that helps, and that's part of what I
you're definitely approachable.
Okay.
Yeah, and very supportive. So I will just, I know I've interrupted a couple times, but I just wanted people to get that.
So we'll start.
Okay.
Obviously, yes, I'm talking about marketing tonight, but I am a lawyer is my day job, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. So I've been practicing now for a little over, 18 years. I was admitted as an attorney here in Minnesota at the end of October 2000. And I've always kind of focused on three kind of key areas. It's more now two these days, but it started out as business law, so business transactions, everything business, forming companies, drafting contracts. I always say that I'm outside general counsel to small and closely held companies.
Okay.
Do some private security stuff, do a lot of different things in that realm, and kind of all things that a business owner would need. I also do a lot of real estate law, real estate transactions, buying and selling real estate, mainly commercial, some residential, working with investors, doing lending transactions, doing lease transactions, and I'm certified by the State Bar Association as a real property law specialist.
Oh, wow.
That'll factor. We'll talk about that a little bit later too, how that came
Okay.
about. And then I used to do more of estate planning. I don't really do it anymore just because some of the other things I do have kind of pushed that out. As a niche,
Okay.
as a focus, but unfortunately to be at a firm like Chestnut Cambronne, where we have a wonderful estate planning department, and so now I always joke and I say I know enough to talk it in the door and give it to my partners to work on.
That's awesome.
But as of late, and I always joke, so this is kind of what everybody cares about these days. You talk to your business lawyer, real estate lawyer, everybody's like, okay, whatever, snooze fest.
Right.
But when I say I represent about 50 or so craft breweries, distilleries, and wineries, the ears perk up.
Yeah.
And then when I throw on top of that, and I also represent a number of retired and some current professional athletes. And the ears perk up again. So I have these two very high-profile niche practice areas that have grown out of my business practice, my real estate practice, my estate planning practice. And so now they've kind of become, we're talking about branding here. They've become my brand.
Yes, they have.
Some people know me as the brewery lawyer. Some people know me as the guy who represents athletes.
Yeah.
You just never know, who you're dealing with. I've got these. It's almost like a schizophrenic thing, depending on who I talk to. Trying to figure out, what I'm known for with these folks. But I'll, whatever it is. As long as there's business coming, I'll take it.
Yeah, as long as there's business, and people
Yeah.
do always talk about, Jeff, lawyer extraordinaire.
Yeah. Well, this is what I was before there was the lawyer extraordinaire, and I start the presentation here for a reason. So this is me. I had started out my practice working at a small suburban Twin Cities law firm. I had clerked there, and then I became, after I was admitted, I became an associate. And I quickly grew restless. I wanted to be at a firm where first of all, I wanted to be downtown.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I decided I'd rather be at a downtown law firm, and I wanted to be able to grow, to build my own practice. Because in the legal industry, in the legal profession, that is how you have financial security, is you grow your own book of business, have your own book of clients, that if you have, it's an asset to be leveraged as you're, at a firm, or if you're moving firms, right? Because
Right.
I always joke, I said, we're like Congress. We exempt ourselves from the laws that we create sometimes. Lawyers don't have non-competes, so we can take our clients, subject to certain rules. So you develop that business.
They're going with you. Oh.
Knock on wood, I've moved firms a few times and they've always moved with me. So,
that says a lot.
this is where I started. When I joined this firm in December 2004, I brought 3 clients with me. I agreed when I left my previous firm, I wasn't even going to attempt to take any clients that I had worked on that somebody else brought in. I was just going to take the 3 that I had brought in, and that's where I started.
Yep.
And about 2 years later,
Were you at the firm you are at now?
No, I'm not.
No, okay.
This was I always say this was 2 firms ago. So I've been. This is the firm I'm at. Chestnut Cambronne is my 4th firm. So this was my 2nd firm when I moved in 2004, and so in 2006 I originated originating is lawyer speak for brought in as a client a major matter that yielded a lot of fees for my firm. and I suddenly noticed that I was being asked my opinion more about things, about the workings of the law firm, other than just being the grinder that I had been. A grinder is what we lawyers call when you're a young associate working on other people's clients for long hours, and they get the credit, and you're sometimes behind the scenes, sometimes you're not.
Right.
But you have to do that because you have to learn.
You have to learn the process
Exactly.
and the
You have
ropes.
to, you have to learn. Yeah, you have to learn your trade. You have to learn your skill. So there's a reason for it. But I was in that grinder mode when I started to move to what we call a finder, and I found a case or found a matter that was that ended up being very lucrative for our firm, and I suddenly had a voice. And I'm like, and me being a control freak, I decided I want to do more of this because I want to have more of a say.
Right.
And that's how it started out. And then another year later, that firm had a program for incubating new businesses. And it had been started by a couple of other partners who then had left the firm in 2007. And I had been like a lieutenant helping them with this program. And the remaining powers that be at the firm said, if this program is going to survive, it's on you. You're in charge of it now. It's your baby. And so I just started networking. I started pounding the pavement. I did anything I could to promote that program. And a lot of my early marketing initiatives grew out of my efforts to grow that. And I'm very proud to say that a lot of clients that I brought in to that program way back when are still clients today and doing very, very well.
Well, and you've got quite a bit of support online. Well, my mom said she's watching. She always does. Tim Cook said, damn straight, Jeff. Bill Satry, hi to Bill. Bill was my co-host in the Minnesota United States pageants on the 17th. Nicole Mittendorf, well-known TV personality, dear friend of both of ours and colleague. Yay, way to go. Two amazing people that know a lot about marketing and branding. Thank you, Nicole, and likewise, girlfriend. Judy Dugas.
Yep.
And Tim Cook wrote finders, minders, and grinders. Who is most valuable? Amy Drury, hello. So a lot of people online watching. Thank you for tuning in. If you're just tuning in, my name is Carla Berline, and from Around Town TV, the Twin Cities' longest airing TV community showcase, I am thrilled to have with me Jeffrey O'Brien, lawyer extraordinaire, and he's talking about marketing, personal branding and marketing for professionals. So again, take it away.
Okay. Well, so that's where I was. That's how it all started, and it's morphed over the years. And I've had different, I would say, personal brands. I had a client early on that he used to say. He would introduce me to people. He said he's a businessman masquerading as a lawyer. Now he meant it as a compliment, right? Because again, there's that stereotype about lawyers, right?
Yeah.
But they were saying that he thinks like a business person. He's more of an advisor versus just a lawyer that the stereotype of we just do things, draft up things, run up a bill, and send you the bill. And I said, let's change that a little bit. I appreciate the sentiment, but let's change that a little bit because I'm not really masquerading. I am a lawyer.
Right.
So it became
not faking it.
Right. I became known as the businessman's lawyer, and I had an early personal website where we called it the businessman's lawyer. Now that moniker has gone away for a number of reasons. But that's what it was. That was my brand for a long time, and people would, it's the businessman's lawyer. It's not the best. It's not a very strong brand, right? So that's so we start.
The Me Too movement meant there you
the
go.
fact that was a good thing. The fact is, I had a lot of woman-owned businesses as clients, and that's kind of antithetical. You don't want to have that as your brand when if you're doing well recruiting women-owned businesses. You don't want to be called the businessman's lawyer. And so it just kind of fell to the wayside over the years, and the lawyer extraordinaire eclipsed it. So that's, again, we'll talk about later. But that was like one of my many pivots.
Awesome.
But so we had that brand, and then I became known as the brewery guy, and I got some accolades for that. I think I attribute my Business Journal 40 Under 40 award largely to, as it was my coming out party as being a brewery lawyer, and a distillery lawyer.
That's where our next meeting is, by the way. One of those breweries.
You know what? My client meetings do not suck. I'll say that. So. We've kind of known that. They said then they started working with athletes. So I kind of been known on that. And then because of, it's nice to, have friends that have radio shows and podcasts and TV shows. And so I became known, this alter ego that grew out called the lawyer extraordinaire. And at the end, when we're done here, I'll explain how that came about. But that's kind of the current brand. And I can say it's the funnest of the brands.
Oh, it's awesome. And it's so you're gonna get into. It is you. You
yeah,
live it
it is
24/7.
yeah it is like this Clark Kent Superman
I
type
love it.
persona now, so it's kind of it's fun.
Yeah.
So that's where this all started from. So what we're going to talk about, what I'm going to talk about, is kind of these key principles that I think are the foundation of my marketing, and maybe for others that are watching, or maybe it already is the foundation of their marketing, and maybe for others may say, oh, I should think about that. So
Right. Yeah.
so this is what I always start with. Anytime I talk about marketing, I always emphasize this, and I've had meetings at my firm when I talk to the other attorneys, and everybody said, well, what are your thoughts? And I always go back to this, that it always starts with service of your client, service of your customers. This isn't Hollywood. I've got on the screen there a couple of movie posters from old Rock Hudson movies. My wife and I love old movies, and we love the old Rock Hudson, Doris Day comedies, and these are two that I think illustrate an example of how this is not life imitating art. So Lover Come Back was a film he did with Doris Day and Tony Randall, where he was a advertising executive, and they created a marketing campaign for a product that didn't exist, and the marketing campaign was so well received that they had to go back and create a product, and of course the hilarity ensues, and that's the basis of the movie. Similar to that, Man's Favorite Sport, he is an Abercrombie Fitch catalog writer back when Abercrombie & Fitch was more like Cabela's, and where he was doing, it was like hunting and fishing gear, and he was writing the copy for the fishing parts of this catalog, and had a wide following, was very well known, wrote very well, did not know how to fish to save his life. And what happens is the boss at Abercrombie & Fitch decides that they think it would be good for marketing purposes to market the company's products for him to go out and join a fishing competition and use some of these products. And he absolutely panics because he's going to be exposed as a fraud because he doesn't know how to fish. Paul Apprentice's character teaches him how to do it, so he saves face, but of course it's hilarious all the way through. That's Hollywood. That's not real life.
Right.
You have to know what you're doing and how to provide effective service for your clients, your customers, before you can come up with a way of marketing and growing that business.
Well, and something I just thought of on the opposite end, one of my newer clients that I've been talking to about working together said to me, they get a lot of people that know, kind of opposite of what you just said, they know the industry, and so they want to work and help, but they don't know marketing and branding.
And those people in my profession, those people stay the minders and the grinders.
Yeah.
And there's a role for that.
Right. It's called volunteer in that industry, actually.
In ours,
Yeah.
that's why you have, in our profession, that's why you have partnership tracks and things,
Right.
and
Testimonials, people that
income
know.
versus equity partner, all those kinds of things.
Right.
People progress based on their, how well-rounded their knowledge and skill set is within a law firm.
Right.
But there's always going to be people that just want to practice law, or do whatever their craft is, and as long as there's somebody else bringing in the business, it works.
It works out great.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
So that's the first point, is all the marketing in the world can't fix if you don't know something. And I think that for some folks, you might be able to sell for a while, but eventually it will catch up, and there will be the moment of truth. And so the bottom line is know what you're doing, master your craft as much as you can first, before you go out and
try to brand it.
Exactly.
Great. Quickly, Amy Drury said, "Hi guys, 2 marketing masters." Amy also said, "And you both look great." Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
And Tim Cook said, "Hey Jeff, is it a good idea for me to paint my face when my favorite team is in town? If my clients," I can't read the rest of it. Oh, you might have to pull it up on yours. I can't read the rest of it, Tim. He'll have to pull it up. Is it a good idea for me to paint my face? For some reason, this iPad won't let me.
I think it's always, if you think it helps.
Can you see it on there?
I'm looking to see now.
He's going to go to an answer.
If you think that it helps develop your business or helps create a brand that you want to establish, then we'll see. Speaking of face painting, you'll see something a little bit later on in this presentation that
Awesome.
I think will probably everyone will get a kick out of in terms of that. So
wait.
I made the decision a long time ago that it was good to paint my face. So I'm just looking to see what he said here. If my clients don't like my team. Oh yes, I know. Tim is a North Dakota hockey fan.
Oh, I
and-
love
and
North Dakota hockey,
we,
Tim.
We frequently we have fun because he knows I represent a former Golden Gopher, and so Tim is a great mediator that I use a lot.
Sounds
And
like a pot
Tim always
stirrer.
likes to put me when we do mediations at his office. Tim always likes to put me in the room with all the Fighting Sioux memorabilia. So
Well, Tim, my brother is a WCHA ref. CJ Berlin.
I miss the old WCHA.
I do
so
too. Yeah, we do too. Or now it's Big Ten, right? It's not even WCHA anymore. Whatever.
I miss what was the WCHA.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. But anyway,
So-
we digress. Oh, and Amy was helping us out. Thanks, Amy. So yeah,
Yeah. So the next principle is, and this is one that I stress a lot, and sometimes it can be stressful. You are what you are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
I know that what I do is not a 9-to-5 job. I have to be available at different hours.
Yep.
And if you're thinking about from a point of view of marketing, I don't turn it off at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I don't turn it off on weekends. And I find ways to work it into the conversation what I do. And I'll be out somewhere and I'll have maybe a brewery client's baseball cap on, and someone will say that they like that brewery. I said, hey, it's great when they're a client of mine. Well, what do you do?
right.
Suck you in.
Right.
How much time do you have?
Right.
So you get it out there.
Wanna go have a beer?
Or
Yeah.
if you're wearing I'll occasionally throw on a jersey of one of my clients for no other reason than it'll trigger a conversation.
Yep.
And I can talk. Well, I like that guy. Well, he's a client of mine. Well, what do you do?
Right.
So this was, we'll talk later about social media, but this was something with lawyers when social media, when Facebook particularly first was growing in popularity. I would know some of the colleagues at the firm I was at the time would have separate Facebook pages. They'd have a personal and a business.
Yep.
And I'm like, no.
Right.
You are what you are. I've created a
Yeah.
brand, I think, and it goes back to the relatability and approachability,
Yep.
where my business and my personal mixes, and I think it's to
Yeah.
the benefit. Everybody
agree.
that follows me on Facebook knows that
getting
besides that I'm doing this podcast or putting this blog post up or doing this presentation, everybody knows, I think at this point, that I have 3 wonderful dogs as the canine kids.
Yes.
Everybody who has seen photos of my wife Jennifer knows that I way outkicked my coverage.
She is amazing. You can tell from.
Yeah.
I follow you. Yeah.
Everybody knows that I have a Toro snowblower that is as old as I am
Yes.
and has been quite the social media star
It
during
has, especially this-
during the winter of 2019. But that helps.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to always see the legal. One of my friends said, you post about the snowblower too much. You need to post about craft beer and the law. And I said, if I got as much feedback and response and activity over those things, I would. But right now, Toro the Conqueror is burning up social media. So guess what I'm going with? I'm going with the snowblower.
Absolutely.
So it all kind of blends, and I think that helps. Because I think it takes out I think there is an intimidation factor in dealing with an attorney.
Absolutely.
And I think by blending everything I do together, I think helps take that intimidation factor out. I can be intimidating when I need to be.
Right.
But when it comes to
you're
getting
very
it,
professional.
well, thank
Yeah.
you. But when it comes to developing business, I don't want walls up. I want to
Right.
be able to encourage people to come to me.
Well,
Be
and you've
approachable.
done that, and to your point of what you just said, so having been an on-air talent, as we know, many people in this town all have their public figure pages, and I'm like, I had my Around Town TV show page, and it has a nice following, always has, and I hit my max of friends on my one page, and you can have a second page, so I started that, and that almost has 5,000 as well, and what I found is people do, they want, if you're approachable, they want to know that stuff. They love my dog Mimi more than if I post about, well, and even they will follow that I was having this show tonight with you as a guest. But if Mimi had been in the picture, it even gets more, like your
Right.
your snowblower.
Right.
And what I found with that is exactly to your point, but also for me, when you have a public figure page, you can't see your friends.
Right.
I want to know what they're doing.
Right.
If they're going to comment, I want to be able to be friends and develop relationships. And if they make a comment about something that it might be applicable to them. So
Right, exactly,
anyway, I agree.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the third element here is I tell people be intentional, and you got of course Dr. Evil up there. You know, there's always there's a time, you know, there's certain things that do happen organically. There's certain things where it's just dumb luck, but I think you have to give it a push in the right direction. Back to that transition I talked about from being a grinder or a minder to a finder. When the firm I was at the time, they would ask us, actually they would require us to put together a marketing plan for the forthcoming year at the end of each year. And they had kind of a template, and I actually still have it today, and I do fill it out, and I give it out to my colleagues who want to see it. And I kept the one I did in 2006. I will always remember it, and I think I still have a copy of it. And I remember what was in it. I said that I wanted to become licensed in Wisconsin, be admitted there, because my wife's family is from Wisconsin, and I thought it was a natural fit, being how close we are in the Twin Cities to western Wisconsin in particular.
Right.
And the way that it works in the legal profession is, after you've practiced so many years in your original state of admission, for the many states, Wisconsin is one of them, allows you to, because they call it waiving in. You can be admitted based on you've already been admitted for so many years in Minnesota, and it's reciprocal. Wisconsin lawyers can do the same thing in Minnesota.
Smart.
So that was on the list.
Okay.
I had on the list, I wanted to become a Minnesota State Bar Association real property law specialist, because I thought that would help I really like doing real estate law, and I thought it would help me get more real estate business if I differentiated myself, saying, but I'm certified. I do this a lot more than just somebody who's dabbling in real estate law, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted that.
An expert.
Yep. I wanted to join. At the time we were living in Maple Grove, and I said I wanted to be part of the Maple Grove Planning Commission.
Oh.
And then the fourth thing, there was a certain relationship with somebody I had known for a long time, a business relationship that I wanted to develop more. Okay. So those are kind of the things that were on it. And I go back and look at it, and within the next course of years, it's like check, 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 check. The relationship that I wanted to foster and network more, and ended up being the relationship that netted this big matter that I had originated, and started to get influence in the firm. I was licensed in Wisconsin. I was admitted in Wisconsin in 2006.
Okay.
In 2008, I sat for the real property law specialist exam, the certification exam, and passed it. And then the only thing I didn't get technically, I didn't get the Maple Grove Planning Commission, but we moved to Albertville. I did do a stint on the Albertville Planning Commission, and this was a case of be careful what you ask for, you might just get it. I was bored to tears and asked them not to renew me for the next term. I had my fill of that, but I did it. So I technically got on the Planning Commission. So I crossed all those off.
Yeah.
But I always try to be intentional. These days I carry around, people talk about their little black book. I have this little notebook, and I call it, you open up the cover and it says future clients. And I've got a little quote in there from Rhonda Byrne's book, The Secret, that's based on the film, about, holding it in your hands and visual, it will happen. And inside of it, I've got names of people that I may have interacted with that I want to get as a client, or a lead that has been given to me, and I put a box and I put the name. And I measure my success. Those are my benchmarks. I measure my success in marketing as how many of those am I checking off, and when am I checking them off? And so is it a little bit kind of arrogant? Maybe. But
I do the same thing.
But I think you need to have that. I think you need to set the bar for yourself. Otherwise, how do you know that what you're doing is effective?
Well, and the whole law of attraction, putting it out in the universe.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I think there is a certain element of intentionality to any sort of marketing strategy, branding strategy. You have to go for it. You have to see it and want to do it and move it that direction before it's not just going to happen. Right.
Yeah, I always say that stuff doesn't just happen. You have to make it happen. So Tim Cook said, CJ Berlin, the best. Thanks, Tim. Chad Stahl said, nice to see you, Jeff. Keep up the good work. Scott Plum, who I love, said, always authentic. Great job, Jeffrey O'Brien. And I agree.
Well, it's ironic. I'm glad Scott said that. Scott I'll give him credit. Scott is the friend I was speaking of earlier, is the one that originally came to me to ask who I knew that could do a presentation like this.
Oh,
so I give Scott a
wow.
lot of credit for even pushing me that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that I don't think that
Scott's
was
amazing.
I don't think it was his intention to do that, but this has been a lot of fun going out and talking
Yeah.
about this. So I give him
And
credit
also
for
a
it.
talented entrepreneur
Absolutely.
and business person, and
Absolutely.
has a great brand in this town.
And a great book too.
Yes. Well, you want to mention it?
What was
What's the name?
Hold on,
Scott.
I'm going to look it up because I just
Okay.
used it
Yeah,
I
and I
just used it
follow
this morning
him,
in
so I-
my BNI educational minute. Taking off into the wind, creating lift out of life. So
Yep, great. It sounds like a great book.
Yeah.
I was reading info about it. So
yeah, yep,
great. Okay. Well, there's your plug, Scott.
yeah. So perfect transition. We're talking about. I just mentioned about I used Scott's book for my education piece at my BNI networking group this morning. Networking. It is the most cost-effective form of marketing. A few years ago, again, back in my formative years of marketing, I was at a firm that was spending money on Yellow Pages. And you hear now these days, SEO is now the new Yellow Pages. We all have to spend
Yeah.
money on SEO, and all these firms want to get law firms
And
to.
even video SEO
Oh,
and
yeah.
Siri.
Everything.
Are there even Yellow Pages around anymore?
I don't know. I don't think I get. I think we.
I
think,
throw them away if they, and I don't even
yeah.
get them dropped off.
I don't.
anymore.
I haven't seen one in a while.
Yeah, I
so
haven't
maybe they're
either.
done. But that's a lot of money to spend for lead generation.
Yes.
Where I look at networking, again, it's more cost effective because maybe if you're joining a networking group like a BNI, then maybe there's the registration fee, but there's a networking event in town every single night. I know that because back when I was building our incubator program, I was attending a networking event every single night.
Right.
Monday through Friday. I mean, there was one year I wore out 2 pairs of shoes going to events. So just the heels would be ground down to nothing. But that's how I built a network of people. I went out and I met people, and the social media aspect these days makes it even easier to network. I think, especially with what LinkedIn has grown to over the years.
Yes, I agree.
Being able to have the professional site where you can post links and message people, and almost being like a professional's Facebook these days.
Absolutely.
I think has been a great way to extend. It's an extension of networking. We'll talk
Yeah.
about that in a minute about social
Okay.
media, but you can't. It's just a good way to meet people, to build trust, to build relationships. You go out, you go to maybe a business card exchange, you get cards, you follow up with people, you get connected on LinkedIn, you go have coffee, have lunch, and you just keep in touch, and you try to introduce them to more people.
Right.
I always like when I go to my BNI chapter, if I don't have necessarily a referral to one of my chapter members for a piece of business, I may refer them another introduction to somebody that I think might be a good strategic partner for them. And I think that's what
Right.
networking is about. Networking is all about the pay it forward. BNI calls it giver's gain. But it's selflessness. You are helping. I think networking is about helping each other's business.
Yes.
And I think if you do it the right way, I think that, again, this is the most
And
cost-effective
you
form
do.
of marketing.
He even reached out to me. So for those of you just tuning in, we first met on the BS Bob Sansevier podcast show, and I was really impressed. But then I was nominated for an award that will be happening this year instead. But he reached out to me immediately and said, "Let's go to coffee. I can help you." Explained why, how, and you were right. And it would have helped some of his clients, but also this organization. I mean, it was a win-win for everybody. So you do walk the talk. You're not just talking right now and saying you do these things. You really do.
And again,
witness of
goes
that.
back to this whole. I told you this whole basis of, again, shattering the stereotype. Lawyers aren't known for that. They're known to be me. When it comes to marketing, we aren't good givers.
Well,
That's
you
just-
are.
that's
Someone
just-
wrote selflessness in the 3 hearts. Amy did. You are very selfless.
That's just the way it. I think that I think by it's a way of differentiating myself from others that are out there. Of, hey, this guy is going to go out and he's going to be like an advisor, a partner. He's going to be looking for business for you. You should meet him. And I get a lot of people that say he's a good networker. You should meet him.
Yep.
I get when we had the recession, I would get a lot of referrals from people who were in transition saying you just should meet the guy. He knows a lot of people.
Right.
And so once you're branded as that, once that's your badge to wear, you kind of have to walk the walk. You have to keep it going. And so that's what I try to do. It's not always easy. You got to try to find the time, especially when you're in a profession that requires you to sell your time to make money. But I think if you make time to do that and make time for networking, which I always try to do, I think that it ends up paying dividends in the end.
Oh, I agree, and you've proven that. But one thing that people don't realize, what he's talking, even though he's done, takes hard work. It's not, and yes, you're going to get into a little bit of social media down the road here, but he, originally wore out 2 pairs of shoes. I mean, that's a big deal. I did the same thing when I was first building Around Town TV. I would volunteer MC or be a part of different things because it was visible, but then people would learn more about Around Town. But also, there was a couple years where I made at least 200 appearances of not just me making an appearance, where I was visible in the community, networking, doing all that. I don't know if I wore out shoes or not, but I certainly put a lot of miles on the car.
I could walk funny too. That might be part of it.
No, I'm sure I did too. But definitely, so I get it, and that's what people forget. When you're building your brand, it's not just going to happen.
No, it takes a lot of hard work and dedication and commitment, and you have to want it. I mean, you have to have a plan. It certainly makes it easier when you have a strategy and a plan.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you have to have the desire to want to progress and to want to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So related networking, we're going to talk about social media's networking. Yes.
Cute.
Social media, I think, gets a bad rap. Yes, there's, these days Facebook and sometimes Twitter get criticized for various things, but it has been good to me in terms of a business development tool. And I have up on the screen here a couple of photos. This is a past and present. The gentleman here on my right here is Tommy Kramer, the former Viking quarterback, and a client of mine. And the other picture is from about 1982 or 1983. I think I'm about 7 or 8 years old there. And hopefully we can, maybe it doesn't show up on camera. The reason it's here is the Tommy is on the screen, the TV screen above my head. And I tell people, I said, who would have, I said, and I use this for 2 reasons, to point out about the benefit of networking, social media, and I'll talk about that in a minute, how I met him on via social media. But also, don't ever say that something's not possible, because who would have thought 30 years after that picture was taken that the geeky looking kid with the Lego thingy is the lawyer for the guy on the TV screen. So why am I talking about TK when I'm talking about social media as networking? Well, I joined a Facebook fan club that it's not around anymore, but it was around at the time, called the Tommy Kramer Fan Club. And I met one of his sisters and a high school friend of theirs.
Okay.
And that was my introduction to Tommy. They said, he needs some help on some stuff. He doesn't have a business lawyer. Would you be willing to help him out? And that's how I ended up representing a guy that, growing up, was my favorite Viking of all time.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And that was the beginning of this niche of representing retired and current professional athletes. And 1 became 2, and 2 became 3, and eventually you get to be known.
If you're good at what you do, you have to, proof is in the pudding.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so when I started working with clients like Tommy and with Carl Eller and with Joe Kapp, that was the original 3. And I would post a lot whenever I was with them. And I think anybody that was on my Facebook got it's like, we get it, you represent these guys. But I got to the right people, and so they would refer, hey, could you help so-and-so?
Yep.
Could you talk to so-and-so? You'd be a good strategic partner for so-and-so.
Right.
And when you start tracing it, now you start to see the business that comes out of it.
Right.
And, and it took, I would say, a good 7 years before I started to get to current players. That was a goal of mine, was to blend retired and current, retired of all eras and current players, because they all have different needs.
Right.
And so but I have to go back and attribute social media to growing that niche. Similarly, the brewery niche.
Right.
When the legislature was debating what became known as the taproom law, was the Surly bill, of allowing a production brewery to have a taproom at their business premises. I was just getting into blogging, and I was just learning how to do Twitter. And I would blog the status of that bill as it went through the legislature, and then I would tweet it out. And I met a few key contacts on Twitter that became extremely good referral sources as the brewery boom took off. And so my two biggest niches, the ones that I'm most known for, the ones that have been extremely lucrative,
Yep.
both from a exposure and a revenue standpoint, grew out of social media and me using it as networking. I don't use it, like I said, back to that 24/7 and kind of blending everything together. This is why I do it. You know, I've used it to network. I'll be up someplace and someone will ask me about something they saw on my Facebook page they just had an interest in. I get to know what my clients like.
Yep.
You know, as part of it. I also know, as a key point, if some people notice, I don't talk about politics on Facebook,
No.
other than liquor law politics. But I don't talk about it on there because I know that I have clients that are on like every single side of an angle.
Same.
So I just keep it off of there.
Yes.
And so all of that, I think that's a strategy. That's a methodology that I use towards social media. I take friend requests from people that I had never met before. There were people that I've only recently met that I've been friends with on Facebook for several years.
Yep.
So if I look and see, is it somebody that has a lot of mutual friends? Then
Yes.
they're probably somebody worth. Or I look at what they're doing, and I accept their friend request, and then I find out later I got mentioned in a comment on somebody else's page. Hey, you should go out and friend and meet so and so. I'm like, okay, now I see what
He even accepted my friend request.
I accept a lot of friend requests. I make a lot of friend requests too.
Right.
But again, it's networking. We
is.
can't get together every single day for coffee, and so
Or booze, happy hour either.
no,
Yeah.
you can't. I can try with all my client meetings, but you got to be careful. But we can be connected and see what people are doing on a regular basis via LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and others. And so that's why I think that there's certainly being able to use social media effectively is key in my marketing strategy, and probably to a lot of others as well.
Absolutely. I'm the same way, and I know there's a lot of people afraid of it. If used correctly, it can be extremely successful for you in your personal brand, but also your business.
Right.
And ultimately, but like anything, you do have to be careful, and it's not perfect. And there's people that get frustrated with it. I always say use Facebook to what your personality is. If you're someone who doesn't want to build your brand and you're just watching the show and you're somebody who's always watched around town, I have friends who hate it and don't want people to be able to post on their page, and you can set your settings that way. And that's what I always tell people: use social media to what is your personality.
Right.
And
right. And if Facebook isn't your thing, that's the beauty of what has changed over how LinkedIn has evolved over the years. Is you can post links, you can post articles, you can post a lot of things. You could post a link to a YouTube video that you do on LinkedIn and still have the same interaction and the same, maybe perhaps the same return if you just then doing it on Facebook if you just don't like Facebook. Because we all know all these sites have these algorithms, and whether or not your stuff is seen or not, Facebook sometimes will push things up or down depending on who's paying for sponsorships and ads. So But like I said, LinkedIn right now is a great one for no matter what. I think you should have a LinkedIn strategy because it's a very effective platform for professionals and businesses.
It has been for me as well. And if you're just tuning in, we have lawyer extraordinaire Jeffrey O'Brien here, and he's been talking about marketing and personal branding for professionals. Something huge, and you're probably going, what? Lawyer extraordinaire talking marketing, personal branding. Well, he's sharing that story throughout. We've had quite a few of you online throughout. It's been very consistent. I appreciate all your comments. And if you're somebody who doesn't want to post publicly or ask a question, you can reach out to either one of us privately. He will be tagged in this when we're done. And he's shared it to his page, and I've shared it to mine. So you can go to the shares as well, and you'll be able to see it.
Okay, so we're going to talk more. Now we're going to talk about content marketing. This has been, again, for what I do these days, for my profession, this is a big thing.
Yeah.
I sometimes say, especially for a business lawyer, the internet is a big competitor. And so I need to do something besides just drafting documents. I need to demonstrate some level of knowledge about what I do to get people to give me the time of day to talk to me about, to think that I know what I'm doing.
do.
Ironically, I think I have to do more content marketing the more marketing I do overall, because I don't want to be back to that original slide of the, it starts with service. You don't want to have your brand being, well, he's just good at marketing, but he doesn't know anything else.
Right.
So I think that I use content marketing a lot these days to try to demonstrate, again, higher subject matter knowledge. So I mentioned before the blogging about the Surly Bill. That was a big piece of my marketing to help build my brewery practice. I've done articles all, for years and years and years. I did a article one time on the Minnesota Professional Firms Act. It was a colleague of mine that was editing our firm newsletter that insisted that I do it. I didn't understand why he wanted me to do it. I was somewhat objecting to it. To this date, it is the only article I think that's been written about the law, and I get calls from attorneys all over the state asking questions about this law because I'm the only one that wrote an article about it.
See.
It's been very lucrative that way.
That's awesome.
I wrote an article for the Growler magazine in 2012. It was on the 10 legal steps to starting a brewery in Minnesota. It was the free consultation that we'd give away when we'd meet with a prospective brewery client. I said, let's just write it up and get somebody to publish it. And we were fortunate that the Growler was willing to publish it.
Great magazine.
I was at 9 brewery clients when that article was published. I tell people, if anybody's watching that's a Kiss fan that knows Kiss Alive or even Frampton Comes Alive, some of those old live albums in the 70s, how much it blew open the careers of those musicians. That was my Kiss Alive. That thing, I would get calls or contacts from all over the country saying, we saw your article, could you represent us?
Wow.
And
That's awesome.
so that's really was the catalyst to growing the breweries and the distilleries and even the wineries too.
Right.
Goes back to that article. Now, I kind of disparaged SEO earlier, but there is organic SEO. I think is very valuable. And I later on created 2 companion pieces. There is out there 10 key legal steps to starting a distillery and 10 key legal steps to starting a cidery, and they look remarkably similar to the brewery one, but words matter, so we want to make sure that everything gets picked up. It's not just brewery. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Love it.
yeah, so
Okay.
this is part of where I came up with a lot. Started doing the radio show. Started out on a real estate show on WCCO. Moved on to when one of the hosts moved on to 1500. Moved on with him, and it's part of that. I created something called the Legal Minute. Everybody that was involved with the show wanted to be on the show, and it was hard for the host to try to get everybody in. And they're pitching sales of homes, and that's a small part of my real estate practice. I said, guys, I have an idea. Why don't I just record a whole bunch of 1-minute PSAs about real estate law? You can plug it into the show, and I never have to come into the studio
Oh, wow.
for the show. And they're like, we love it, let's do it. So these minutes have been updated over and over and over again as I moved stations, as I moved firms. They just get updated and recut. But so I think there's about 150 of them now that get rolled on. If you listen to the show on 7 o'clock on Saturday mornings, you will hear 1 minute of that pop in on some topic each week. So
That's awesome.
so I did a lot of this. There was some stuff that didn't necessarily work, and I tell the story that when I was early on doing continuing ed programs, I took on some really weird, boring topics. One time I did one on insurance and indemnity clauses in commercial leases, and not only was the guy it was the after lunch slot, which is bad enough, but the guy in the front row was asleep and drooling. So that really makes you want to continue on with the presentation. It's like, let me just slug through this. So it was not the best topic to choose. Didn't get a lot of business
great.
out of it. I have another one I did on conversions from one entity to another. My firm had done a all-day seminar for it was like the 3rd or 4th tier continuing legal education group on partnerships and corporations and LLCs. And so I did this conversion program. Again, we got nothing from it.
Right.
Fast forward to 2015, Minnesota changes its LLC statute completely, and I get an email from an attorney in town who's editing something called the Minnesota LLC Desk Book, put out by Minnesota CLE, which is the top continuing legal ed provider in Minnesota. And he says, and he's got my materials attached. I had posted on my little personal website, and he said, I found these, and there's still good law after the law change. Would you be willing to update a few statutory citations and
That must be my computer.
And would you be willing to update a few citations, and we can publish this as a chapter in the book? So I get to be published in this desk book that gets, promoted heavily and updated every year, and all because of this goofball presentation I did that we got no business from back in 2005.
Oh my gosh.
So that's why I always
See.
like to take the the opportunities when they come.
Looking at the battery, making sure we don't need to plug it in. We might need to plug it in. But I can
Okay.
always, if I have to, I'll just step off.
So related to content marketing, we got kind of a corollary of the content marketing, which is what I call the KISS principle.
Yep.
Not that KISS principle. I told you about that. Tim, if you're still watching, about painting your face in makeup. I did, and it has worked for me. That's me at 18 years old, dressed up like Paul Stanley from KISS.
Oh, hilarious.
Who figures that band figures in quite heavily into my marketing. But one of the things is, I talk about KISS meaning keep it simple, stupid. I would do these weird esoteric presentations and didn't get anything out of them. It was a lot of work
right.
and a lot of time taken away from otherwise profitable work. And a client of mine, I'm fortunate to know a lot of marketing people like yourself and have clients that are marketing people. And one of my clients said, you need to dumb it down a little bit. You need to go back to the basics. You would be
Yeah.
surprised as how many people don't have an entity formed or are signing contracts in their own name. You need to focus on that. And that's what became the presentation that I give now that's called Business Law 101 for Business Owners, which is basically an hour-long presentation where I kind of highlight basic principles of business law, some employment stuff, some trademark stuff.
Important.
And it's essentially an attempt to scare everybody in the room to hire me. Which is what it
works.
It does. It does. And I simplified it even further now, where I have a saying about doing your own legal, going on the internet and using forms or doing your own legal work. I said, when it comes to from legal issues, DIY usually equals SOL.
Oh,
and I
totally.
have that saying is framed, and it's on my desk at the office downtown. And it illustrates a point. You don't have to write 100-page treatises to get business. You need to do something. I have presentations that I do for lawyers that are continuing ed programs that are way different than when I'm talking to a room full of business owners trying to get their business. And you have to know your audience.
Well, and when you're self-employed and you're working hard, it's easy to skip that, but it'll always bite you in the butt.
Yep.
It always comes, and then you're going, I wish I had talked to Jeff.
Yep. And it's always cheaper. If the worry is that you don't want to go to a lawyer because of they're expensive, trust me, it's always cheaper when we're involved up front than if we're trying to clean up something at the end after the milk is already spilled.
Yeah, it can be ugly.
So the next principle, I've touched on this a few times, but developing niches. This has been a key piece of my marketing. I mentioned we had my previous firm that had the incubation center program. That was a niche devoted to working with new and emerging companies. That was not an easy niche to try to grow. There's not many business lawyers in town that don't work with new and emerging companies. So trying to corner the market on that is a very exhausting strategy. And so, but out of that came the brewery practice. And like I said, that one has been a very lucrative niche. I know that it's going well when I have other attorneys in town referring clients to me. It's like if I'm known that much in my own profession as the guy who does this, that's a good thing.
Right. Yep.
Real estate, like I mentioned, with the certification, I've used that to develop that as a niche, and then even further into that, I've done a lot of work with real estate investors buying real estate within their IRA and a self-directed IRA.
Awesome.
There aren't a lot of attorneys that know that have taken the time to learn the ins and outs of that. I did. It was by necessity because I had clients that were interested in doing it, and as a result, to this day, I still get a lot of clients that are doing that. And so it's been, again, it's not as high profile a niche as some of the other ones, but it's been a very lucrative niche.
That is really cool. And that's Carl Eller?
That is Carl Eller, yes. So that's the
Wow.
athlete niche. And I talked about that, about
Yep.
how, building up, meeting these guys and the people the other advisors that are around them, and you network with those folks and you build, you do good work for them. And, trust is a big issue when you're dealing with athletes. And I've had some that will hire me and they say, I know who else you represent, and that means something to me. Can you help me out on something? And so, and it's fun.
Right.
It's fun being able, as a sports fan.
Yep.
It's fun working with those guys, but it's also very rewarding and fulfilling to, for as much as I've always admired them and the joy that they've given me during their career.
Yep.
To be able to help them on something that I know how to do.
Yes.
It's fun too.
And that is one thing, even though he's great at marketing and getting his name out there and cross promoting. You are very private and very confidential, and I've noticed that about you. It's someone that you can definitely trust.
Yeah,
Yep.
with the clients that I talk about, I talk about that with their permission, and I think that they know that when they give me the permission, that they know it's helping them because they know that I promote the heck out of my clients and try
Right.
to and try to push business their way too.
How many attorneys do that? Zero.
There's a
Besides
few,
you.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it's I would say I'm in the minority in terms of,
Yeah.
but it's, as I tell people, I have a practice that's transactional. That's different than a litigation practice. Like I said,
Yes.
these things,
Very true.
this strategy is custom created by me for my practice. Any type, whatever your business, if you're a lawyer in a different practice area or in something else, there may be you may custom create your own strategy. This one, like I said, this one just works well with what I do.
Right, right. Well, and this show, that's what this show is. So having been on broadcast for 16 years, we have the longest airing TV community showcase featuring Minnesota's best kept secrets and businesses. We knew with cord cutters, and at the time there not being a high level HD channel, channel 6 was 6 on every dial on every cable company, but until recently it wasn't live streamed, it wasn't on, they weren't doing a lot with social media until recently, and there wasn't a higher channel. So at the time I took it off thinking, well, this will be interesting to see. Our viewers just switched and they like being able to talk
Yep.
to me.
Yep.
And this is a great way to bring unique things like this on that you couldn't do in 3 minutes before.
Yep.
And I flipped my brand, but this is how people knew me,
Yep.
so it kept it alive.
Yep. Well, that is a great segue, Carla, to the next point, which is the importance of the pivot. Of course, anybody that's a Friends fan out there remembers Ross with his sofa and the staircase, the pivot, 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 where they end up cutting the
Yeah.
sofa in half, and he goes tries to get back to get. I think tries to get store credit for $4 or something. But that's what you just talked about as an example of that. You need to be looking. It's like playing chess. You need to look at 3-4 moves down the board and anticipate where things are going
Yep.
and be able to pivot into those things. I mentioned working with a lot of new and emerging companies. When I was an attorney joined that firm, and he wanted to work with me in that program, and he had a brewery that needed some help, and that was our first brewery client. And you could see how many legal issues were involved with them, and you could see it was just about the time when they started talking about this tap room thing, right?
Right.
So you could see that we were on the upswing in that industry, and we were hitting at the right time. I said, we need to go get more of that. So we pivoted out of kind of being more industry agnostic when it came to the business, the startup businesses, and focusing on a particular niche of startup business, which was the brewery and then later the distillery and the
Yeah.
winery, because you could see that was where the market was going.
Yes,
And
very much so.
it was a deliberate effort, and that's why I focused my marketing in that direction for a number of years to go capture more of that business. Now we've got a good number of those clients. The industry's changing again. I'm
Yes.
trying to pivot. You're trying to pivot back to being a little bit more industry agnostic. You don't want to just be known as just working on one industry. So you still have, you want to keep cultivating that as a niche, but you want to pivot back and have other stuff.
Right.
And
Otherwise,
so-
people think you're just doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have to do that with my real estate stuff. The real estate, all this branding, a lot of it works well with the business side, but the real estate side can get a little bit lost in the shuffle. And so I always try to, sometimes I use a hashtag, yes, I still do real estate. And I get calls from agent friends who are like, so are you still doing real estate, or are you just doing brewery stuff now? Or I'll have
Right.
a brewery or distillery client saying, can you recommend a good real estate lawyer to review our lease? I'm like, yeah, speaking. So that's a thing where I have to keep pivoting back to that.
Yeah.
It's not just always pivoting into something new, it's pivoting back to something to your, those core principles, those core areas to remind everybody, yeah, I do this.
I made that mistake. I worked so hard on the brand of the on-air talent piece, and people at first didn't know that I actually did all the sales for Around Town and the feature stories. And then once they realized that, that's all they knew about me, host and sales. So when I first was flipping my model and monetizing the consulting piece, the business strategy, the marketing, the communication, social media, and those that follow me on social media had even, some of those people dubbed me the social media queen. Well, I can't tell you how many people actually asked me. I was in a 3-hour meeting with a client, and they didn't follow me on social media, but the person who introduced me did, and they said, now, do you know anything about social media? And I said, yes, and I can give you some references and things, but then I realized I didn't build that brand, even though I was acting it and executing it. So it took me 6 months, 6 to 9 months for people to realize I had to do the pivot
Yep.
and really focus on it.
Yep, and that goes back to the why you do a marketing plan every year going into the next year and figure out what you're going to do and figure out what you need to change and where you things need to go. I pivoted my original website we had the Businessman's Lawyer and that one has become a craft beverage law specific site. Everything else is gone from it. It's been redone. There's another site where I house all my content and have a blog site. I pivoted off. I changed that site because I needed it for something else.
Yep.
And so, and it was becoming duplicative with something else that I had. And so you always have to, and like I said, you have to be anticipating where things are going and what you want to move into.
Yeah, absolutely. Nope, and something I didn't do. But
Related to that, and this is probably one of the hardest principles to adhere to, is knowing when to fold them. You got Kenny Rogers and the Gambler there, knowing when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, and when to run. It's easy to say yes to something, to try something for the first time in terms of a marketing initiative. The hard part is letting go of something that may not be working, and the fear is always that you letting go of it, you're going to lose business. Well, yeah, but you're not getting enough business. You're not getting enough business out of it. You maybe need to pivot into something that is more lucrative.
Right.
And this goes hand in hand with the last principle of the pivoting. I have been involved with organizations that I either stepped down or walked away from because it wasn't working. I mentioned I got on the planning commission. I didn't like it. It wasn't.
Right.
It
wasn't a fit.
It was a waste of time for what it wasn't, and it wasn't helping over my overall business, which is why I pretty much do everything, is develop business.
Right.
And so I got rid of it, right? I mean, for me, it's, when you're talking about something that's taking, when you're always marketing,
Right.
you're taking away time from your family. The last thing I need is something else
Right.
that's taking time away from my family. I'll cut it and
Yeah.
and can reallocate that time to family time or something else. So you have to know when to let it go, and it's difficult. Sometimes it takes some intestinal fortitude to make that decision. But in the end, I think it works better. I mentioned before about my BNI chapter. I have switched BNI chapters. I have gone and come back because it works.
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does.
Right.
That's another example of something that I had to decide at one point. It had to go. So you just have to prioritize, and you have to look at those things. I like to look. I do measure, for where I get new business, where it comes from, track those things,
Yep.
and decide at some point this isn't working.
Right.
I have to.
Where your efforts are best spent.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
and my big saying, instead of when to fold them, is that, my dad and I will talk about this, that ship has sailed. Or for me,
Yep.
there was a situation where my dad said, that ship has sailed, or that door is shut. And I went, no, I think the ship sank because I waited too long.
Right.
Yes. So here, two things, the pivoting and this whole folding them thing, huge.
Yep.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll close out talking about the importance of a personal brand. I'll tell the story of where this came from, this lawyer extraordinaire thing. So I had a client, a guy by the name of Andrew Schmidt. We call him Schmitty. And Schmitty is known best for being the guy that for at least 5 years pushed hard at the Minnesota legislature to repeal the ban on Sunday liquor sales, the Sunday liquor store sales.
Okay.
We formed a nonprofit called Minnesota Beer Activists. That was his vehicle for advocating for the change in the law.
And he wanted the change.
He wanted the change,
Okay.
yes. And it took a number of years and dealing with
it
a lot
did.
of special interests, but we finally did get that law change. So, but of course, I got to know Schmitty, and he was going to be a co-host of was then a podcast. Now it's a full-on show
Wow.
on Twin Cities News Talk AM 1130 called the Minnesota Beer Cast, and he would have me come in occasionally and talk about legal issues surrounding the brewing and distilling industries. And when I'd go on the show, he would introduce me as lawyer extraordinaire. And I said, and the first time he did it, I said, just be careful, because I don't need the lawyers board coming down on me because I'm calling myself extraordinary, giving myself some sort of certification or specialization that they don't offer.
Yeah.
And he just kept doing it. So we as a joke, it just became like this was the alter ego. It was like a moniker, right? It was like lawyer extraordinaire trademark. And his co-host for the show is Drew Lee from
Oh,
Justice
yeah.
to Drew.
Yep.
So I'm going off on my libertarian high horse talking about Sunday sales repeal, and Drew pulls me aside after one show and he said, you kind of match up with us philosophically on the morning show. Would you be interested in coming on and being kind of our legal guy?
Cool.
And I said, why not? And so whenever there's some sort of could be a Supreme Court issue or something else, he'll give me a call and say, could you come in or could you call in? A couple weeks ago, we joke about it's like flashing the bat signal. We literally did it. I was at a stoplight driving my BNI meeting, and I get a text from him. What do you think about this? And I just went back and said, call in and talk about it on the air. And so I got on the air, and he calls. He says, we literally flashed the bat signal.
Oh, funny.
And so he would say, friend of the show, lawyer extraordinaire, when he introduced me. And of course, the producer of that show is Samantha Sansevier, who's Bob's daughter. Bob gets wind of this nickname,
Samantha's
this moniker.
a very talented
yes, she
young
is.
lady.
And Bob decides he's got to outdo it and says, now if you go on his show and you listen to the podcast, he'll introduce me and I'll try to get the right intonation. I'm going to not do this right, but he goes, attorney, lawyer, barrister extraordinaire, because he's got listeners in the UK, so the barrister is for that.
Oh, funny.
And so it was this weird connection between these three shows that I was
wondered
doing.
why he did that.
And that's how it just kept going. And so last year, I decided to have some fun with it. I went on Zazzle.com and I bought, they had a baseball cap that said lawyer extraordinaire, so that'd be funny to get. So I went online and I posted on Facebook and I was joking about how I was doing branded merchandise and I was just going to embrace this. And within a week, I had a call. I was on a call with a client, and at the end of the call, he says, now, how do I get one of those hats? I said, you get this as a joke, right? I'm not so pretentious that I'm not coming up with branded merchandise for lawyer extraordinaire. I did though buy the domain name, so I guess so more to come
Awesome.
on that.
Smart.
But so that's how it kind of came about. I just go with it now. People want to call it that, that's fine. We'll just roll with it. It's fun. It gets attention. It's a conversation piece, and so it's fun to do it. That is, for better or for worse,
Yep.
that's the brand now. So
And it has. I mean, that's how I knew you. It was, from Bob and others. And you're not. When you sit down with you're not this pretentious, so you're anything but. You work your butt off.
well, it's sort of like I go back to the my slide when I had the KISS principle up there, and I said about how much that the band KISS played a role in my development and my marketing over the years. It is a little bit like that. It is sort of like, this is like my grease paint. This is the face
Yeah.
paint when that goes on, and
Right.
that persona. And then when you go home and I get to hang out with Jennifer and the dogs and
Yeah.
and do whatever, and it's not that anymore. I'm off stage. I'm not performing. I'm not
Right.
the lawyer
Odd.
extraordinaire. I'm just Jeff, the guy. So
Husband and doggy daddy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, so I've got here, this is my contact info
Yes.
for anybody that's watching. They got the firm website there,
Let's see if I
chestnutcambrone.com.
can get that.
I've got the JeffreyO'Brien.today, that's where a lot of the old content is housed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the blog site. All the podcasts are there.
It's a cool site. Go to that one. That's one of my favorites.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the JeffreyO'BrienESQ.com site, that's the one that was the original Businessman's Lawyer site. That was a blog site. When we pivoted over to the other page, and this is now the craft beverage law specific page. So there's my writings on craft beverage issues, but also links to statutes and regulations and trade groups and everything like that. So
If you're having trouble seeing the screen, it's 612-336-1298. 612-336-1298 or J. O'Brien, O-B-R-I-E-N, at Chestnut Cambrone, and that's Chestnut as it sounds, and then Cambrone, CAMBRONNE.com. Or message us on here, and you can reach them that way as well. Yeah. So, well, that was a great presentation.
thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. If you were someone who was tuning in at the end, we have Jeffrey O'Brien, lawyer extraordinaire, and he's been talking to us about marketing and personal branding for professionals. If you missed any of this, it will be embedded permanently And we will be uploading the links to every social medium, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, to several boards there, all of our social media pages. And you can also catch it on YouTube and Vimeo, so you can watch it at your leisure. Share it with people. This is something that every professional should at least watch. And I think all of us as professionals at some point, if I've already needed you with his legal counsel and background, but he's just really good at everything that you need for business. Really good business strategist as well.
Thank you.
More than a lawyer extraordinaire will be my dub for you. Judy Dugas said, great message, thanks. Tim said, thanks a million, folks. Amy said, I need to pivot. Hi, Tanya. Hi, Chris. We've had several others. I appreciate all of you that have tuned in. Around Town TV Live, right here, you can watch it right where you are now, but we go live Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. and then the show stays embedded. Stay tuned for next Tuesday evening. I'm confirming that guest, but also I have a feeling you're going to be seeing a little bit more of Jeff. He lives close by, and we're both doggy parents, so, and I have to meet your wife as well.
Yes.
Yes, but again, I do appreciate you tuning in. You're watching Minnesota's longest airing TV community showcase. We've been dubbed as featuring Minnesota's best kept secrets and businesses, and I think you can attest you are definitely one of those.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you next Tuesday evening right here on Around Town TV. Thanks for tuning in.